But hi, hello. Thank you so much for
Hello.
being here. Can everybody hear us? Can everybody see us? Yes? Yes? Okay. Hello, everyone. It's Mxiety. We are on tonight with Dr. Elizabeth Kilmer, and we'll be talking about isolation and setting boundaries with people while in isolation, which I think is a hot topic right now, right around the time of Thanksgiving.
Yeah,
Yeah. Dr. Kilmer, thank you so much for being here.
absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. It's really good to be here.
I'm so excited to talk about this. I'm so excited to dive in, and I'm so excited to finally have you because, these are planned like so far in advance. And so thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Yeah, this was planned pretty far in advance.
It is, yeah.
Which, kudos to us for being prepared.
Yeah, exactly. Kudos. So if you all would like to find out more about Dr. Kilmer, please check out the links here. But also, tell us a little bit about yourself to start.
Yeah, so my name is Dr. Elizabeth Kilmer. I'm a clinical psychologist, which means I went to school for far too many years and got my PhD and learned all about all sorts of stuff. I currently serve as the Director of Education and Training for Game to Grow, which you can learn more about from those links that I'm sure have popped up. Game to Grow is a 501c3 nonprofit that believes in the use of games of all kind for community, individual, and educational growth. Specifically, we're really well known for our therapeutic social skills groups that utilize Dungeons and Dragons, as well as our therapeutic social skills groups that utilize Minecraft. And we recently have launched a multi-tiered training program that has tracks for mental health professionals, community members, and educators. And then I see clients as well.
Wow. So you're not busy. You just sit
I'm
around
not
and
busy.
you eat
No.
candy all day,
I'm
do
not,
nothing.
I just hang out
Yeah,
in my house.
just hang out. Why not? Why not? Oh my gosh. You do so much good. So thank you. Just thank you for that. Just thank you for that alone.
Well, thank you.
So really interesting background to and I do want to dive in, and we'll definitely, I think, considering all of us here, I don't know anybody who's not a geek or nerd here, so I am not sure how we could talk about any of these subjects without mentioning, Minecraft or anything like that as a coping mechanism. So we'll definitely be still diving into that.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess to start us off gently, let's talk about isolation.
Yeah.
Super gently. Yeah.
Super gently.
Oh my gosh. So how's it been? How have you been?
How's it been? I'm thinking about adopting a dog. That's how it's been.
Oh, that's great. They're really hard to find right now.
Yeah, they are. We have identified one that might be okay, and we're waiting for them to call us back.
Okay.
After I filled out our 10-page application.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm we're two doctors who work from home. Please consider us.
Please, we'll take care of this dog. I swear.
Yeah, we've got the training. We understand behaviorism. It's fine. So I mean, in kind of all honesty, I'm doing pretty well, all things considered. I'm very much an extrovert. I love going to conventions. I love getting to meet people. I never wanted to work in my own private practice because the idea of not having coworkers just sounded kind of miserable. So I will say that I'm very much on the I need people to survive end of the spectrum. And I have absolutely connected with people online. I play Destiny with friends. We play D&D. Other kind of just Animal Crossing, other ways that we connect.
Animal Crossing.
Yeah, exactly. But at the end of the day, sometimes it's still really hard, right? Because even though we love to get to connect with other people with games, it can feel different. And it also is very different when you're choosing to connect with someone via a game or via an online platform like Zoom versus not really having a choice. Our brains really don't like it when we feel stuck. Our brains hate it when we feel like we don't have options or don't have choices. And so part of what this pandemic has done around kind of that isolation and loneliness has made it a lot harder. Also, if all of your responsibilities are now on the computer and all of your social life is on the computer, that can be a little overwhelming, right? Yeah. Especially for people who intentionally took jobs where they got to be away from screens for a while, or they were moving around a lot. So often we're seeing this kind of really awful kind of combination of things, which means we're seeing a loss of choice. We're seeing a loss of ability to like go in person and see people. We've got an increase of screen time, which is not inherently bad, but if it means that like all of my engagement with others is in front of a screen,
Right.
that might mean I'm moving a little bit less. It might mean that I am getting like increased eye strain or kind of headaches. It can feel really stuffy, and it can feel like you're not really ever getting a break. For a lot of people, their like home fun space is also turned into their workspace.
Right.
And our brains have a really hard time kind of disconnecting from that.
Yeah. Yeah. There was a great tweet that I read yesterday that was like, just going to, I spent the weekend staring at a big screen because I spend the workday staring at a medium screen. And when I'm not doing that, I look at a really small screen. And
Yes.
yeah, I was thinking about the fact, like I was giving myself kind of crap for, I was like, oh, I'm on Twitter all the time. And I'm like, well, it's also my only social connection right now. So maybe it's not the word. I mean, it depends on what you're doing on Twitter and how you're interacting with people. But it is a lot, like, you know, I'm talking to people in DMs or responding to other people's messages. It's a connection that I don't have otherwise. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
But so is there a difference between per se the interactions that we have with people through screens versus in person? Because I know that there's a lot of arguments around that, and I know, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, there's a lot of arguments around that. And I'm really excited that we're actually going to get a lot more data on that over this like coming months. And granted, any data that we're collecting during a pandemic has like a giant asterisk on it because a pandemic is a massive, what we call confounding variable, which means it's something that's going to go in and potentially mess up your data in one way or the other. But I think realizing that we're moving more and more to this kind of online globalized world, we're going to see more research about this coming out in the coming months and the coming years. So I'm really excited. There is enough research that I feel really good about talking about how kind of online friends are real friends, right? If you're getting the same kind of needs met, if you're able to have the same kinds of deep conversations, being able to connect with people online can be immensely important, especially if you live in an area in which you're isolated from people that you might be able to otherwise connect with. And maybe that is because of physical limitations. Maybe that's because you live in a small town and you don't connect with anyone around you. You have identities that don't match with some of the people in those towns. That can absolutely be a part of this, being able to kind of feel connected with other people. But at the end of the day, if you're still feeling like I would rather see someone in person and I would than just connect on a screen, I know that when I'm connecting with my parents, we have a harder time connecting over a Zoom call because if I was in person at their house, I would like help my mom cook, and then we take the dog for a walk, and we'd be doing these activities in between the conversation. When you're on a Zoom call with someone, there's nothing else happening. And so you're expected to continue this conversation. And if you've been trapped inside your house for 8 months, you might not have done anything particularly interesting that day. And so it can feel really challenging. I know especially we're moving towards Thanksgiving. And so I'm sure there are going to be a lot of large family Zoom calls. And those can be really hard because you can't break off into those like smaller pods and have these smaller conversations unless you do something like really like intentional, like a breakout room. And so you're kind of stuck with this like almost presentation model, which can be really hard.
Right. But we're also, I mean, kind of going back to Thanksgiving and the fact that every year you hear two conversations. One is, I'm so excited to finally see my family. Thanksgiving is the best time because there's no Christmas pressure yet, and it's not about gifts or anything. We're just hanging out. And then you see the other side of, my parents don't accept my sexuality. My parents have different political beliefs. My parents are genuinely rude or narcissistic or just aren't nice people, which are not one and the same. Just wanted to throw that out there. But yeah, so I felt this too. I remember especially like in high school where I had nowhere to go.
Mm-hmm.
But I had to be surrounded by family that did not treat me right. So
Mm-hmm.
how do we set up these, I know this is the broadest question and this is kind of the question of the night, but how do we set up these boundaries when you're already feeling alone and isolated, and like your family might not be the best, but it's the only people that you can talk to right now, and all of
Mm-hmm.
that. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think you really hit on a couple of really important points around that. Like, we're all feeling really isolated right now, or most of us are feeling really isolated right now. And that can also make our brain really want those things that feel familiar and comfortable. And maybe that family is kind of toxic, but your brain understands their kind of toxicity. And so it
Mm.
might feel easier than trying to reach out to a new community, because that's unknown. And that could be way better, or it could also be worse, but it's going to be uncomfortable in the middle.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And so our brain oftentimes is going to choose the thing that they know more about. I think that when we're thinking about setting boundaries, before you even decide how you're going to set those boundaries, you need to decide what your boundaries are, which oftentimes means having kind of a hard conversation with yourself or another loved one or your therapist, someone that you can trust, around what is going to serve me this Thanksgiving, right? That might be a conversation about your values. What are the things that are important? What are the things that aren't important? That might be a conversation about your own kind of feelings of stability right now.
Mm-hmm.
What is going to help me versus what is going to hurt me,
Mm-hmm.
right? So having an understanding of like, what is going to be helpful this Thanksgiving, or what is important to me, right? If connecting with family is something that's really important to you, and you know that your family is kind of toxic, you can hold both of those things. Or if
Mm.
typically engaging with your family is really positive, but you voted in different ways this election, and then that's not really something that you can ignore this year, you can still hold both of those things. But you're going to want to be really intentional about your boundaries. You may also be encountering family that's really pressuring you to come visit in person, whether you
Yes.
live far away
Right.
or if you live in the same city. And what we're seeing in terms of recommendations is the recommendation is you do not celebrate in person with anyone outside of
Right.
your own household. And so we're going to see kind of that pressure. And there's a lot of areas in which we're going to see increased internal pressure, which is your own kind of loneliness and need for connection, and those external pressures. And with family, that's all wrapped up in these systems that have gone back your entire life. It can
Mm-hmm.
be really,
Mm-hmm.
really hard to set boundaries and have those be respected, because that's something that's new. It's something that's changing the system. And even if your family is not intentionally toxic, I don't know anyone who's intentionally toxic, so that's
Sure.
maybe not the place to
Sure.
say it. But
Sure.
I guess there are some people. There are some
No,
people.
sure. There are mean people who are like, I know I'm mean, but
I know I
usually,
mean,
yeah,
yeah. But I think
usually not.
if you've got family members who genuinely want the best from you and they're trying their hardest, that can be some of the hardest people to set boundaries against, because you know that their intent is really positive, but the impact of their words or their behaviors can be really problematic. So the first thing you're going to want to do is figure out what is important to you, what you're going to tolerate, what you want, and what you're not going to tolerate.
Okay.
Having that kind of understanding and writing that down, talking that through with someone else is going to be really, really important. Because anytime we start to have conversations with families or we start to set boundaries, oftentimes that becomes a high stress situation,
Right.
which means our brain just loses it.
Right. Fight or flight. Let's just get all that cortisol out there and
Yeah,
go
your
nuts.
brain's like, this is the same as a mountain lion attacking you.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, what your brain does is really helpful when a mountain lion is attacking you, but it's
Sure.
less helpful when
Not
you're
many
trying to
mountain
put a
lions.
boundary.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah, but it's less helpful when like your grandmother is telling you that you need to like eat more crescent rolls, or is asking you about why you haven't graduated yet.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of all of those pieces can be really, really challenging. So having a game plan and understanding what is important to you, what you're going to tolerate, what you want, what you're not going to tolerate, and then deciding what you're going to do about it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The kind of nice thing, depending on where you are, is you do have physical space. Maybe that physical space is you're in the same city, but like you don't have to open your door. But for a lot of us, we do have some physical space between us and the people that we care about, but might be kind of challenging to work with. And so with that, right, you can kind of decide how you want to communicate. If you know that getting on the phone is going to have like escalated tension and it's going to be really problematic, then you might choose not to have a phone call. If you know that getting on a Zoom call so you can see their face is going to be really helpful for you, that may be great. Or you can write out a manifesto in your email or a text message and kind of send it to them. And people will try and argue with you about your boundaries. And I do advocate for being willing to negotiate, having your non-negotiables, but aside from that, being willing to negotiate or problem solve with the people that you care about, as long as they're not engaging in toxic or manipulative behavior. But this kind of can be a conversation in terms of kind of being able to kind of set those boundaries. But really think about how you're going to be the most successful in this. Start with what you want, and then kind of jump into the what I'm worried about or how is this going to go awry. If that makes sense.
No, that does. And I'm gonna ask I think a hard question, but how do I know what I want?
That is a super hard question.
Sure.
Right? And that's part of why I encourage you to talk to someone that is a safe person. So whether that is a friend, whether that is connecting with an online community, whether that is your therapist, to figure out what you want. And sometimes what you want isn't possible. And what you want is different from what is actually going to serve you and be good for you. Right? What I want is to like just drive up and visit my sister and hang out with her all weekend.
Right.
But I'm not going to do that inside. Right? That's not an option. Now we will put on masks and stand 6 feet apart and go for walks or go for hikes. Right? So we figured out how to kind of manage that. But part of that was a conversation that we had to have around kind of our own boundaries. Now I'm really lucky. My sister totally respects those boundaries and we didn't have to engage in a lot of problem solving around it. But it's not necessarily the same with family members. And part of it is you may not know exactly what you want and you may not know exactly what you need, and that's okay. But if you don't know exactly what you want or what you need, you cannot expect that another person is going to be able to know that and be able to respect that.
Right. Right. Oh my gosh. Yes. Oh my gosh. I found I had this weird, and I don't know if this is tangential, but I feel like it's related, but I had this weird moment yesterday where I kind of started I was watching a Christmas movie and I started crying, not because of the Christmassiness of the movie, but because people were like interacting and hugging and high-fiving, and that was the thing that got me, that I was like, that's all I want right now. Like, that's all I want for Christmas is a hug from somebody who isn't my husband, and I can't have that. And that acknowledgement, I think from a lot of us is just super important to just take that second.
Absolutely. You should take a second, right? You don't want to get trapped in that, like, I wish the world was different, because there's not a lot you can do with that right now.
Sure, right.
But it is important to acknowledge that, to like experience that and validate those feelings, because that's the best way to let those feelings kind of keep to pass over you, right? We want to experience feelings kind of like a wave. Sometimes they might knock us down. Sometimes it's uncomfortable. Sometimes we're going to feel exhausted when the wave has passed, right? But if we try and stop that wave of emotions, we're just going to get super wet and it's not going to work. And we're going to feel really stuck. And we're not going to be able to move forward because we're trying to like stop this thing that is going to keep moving. And so making some space for yourself to be sad, right? Now that can be challenging, especially because sometimes it's helpful to talk to other people and tell them that we're sad. To have that experience or those feelings validated by other people. We live in a culture that largely is uncomfortable with uncomfortable.
Yes.
And so if you say, man, I'm feeling really sad right now, or I'm feeling really lonely, oftentimes the person you're talking to is going to try and fix it.
Yes. Oh my gosh.
Because they want to be helpful.
Yes.
And they don't want you to be sad. I remember calling my mom and being like, I'm just feeling really lonely. Like, I feel like that it's just kind of hit. And she was like, well, you can talk to people on Zoom and you can call me and we can. And I was like, I need you to tell me that, like, you also feel this way sometimes.
Right. Right.
And I'm not crazy. And she was like, oh, well, yeah, I feel lonely. And I was like, thank you. That's all I needed.
Yeah.
That's all I needed.
Yeah. But that's the thing, and we've even had this kind of discussion in stream, I think last stream, And my immediate mind was like, oh no, like I'm about to admit that I feel lonely and this sucks. But is that going to make the community uncomfortable? Which is ridiculous because we're literally a mental health related community and stream and everything. So that's silly. But it was definitely a thought that still crossed my mind. It was very much like, I'm about to say that we're all uncomfortable. How comfortable are we all how comfortable are we all admitting that?
Yeah. Well, and the reality is you probably did make the community uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But the difference is that this is a community that has said, I'm willing to be uncomfortable because I'm being uncomfortable in the service of something else.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Emotions are often uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh man, emotions suck because they make you feel things, right?
Yeah.
Which inherently is what they're supposed to do. But
yes, it is.
But feelings are like in the way of accomplishing stuff, and like you have to stop and acknowledge that there's a lot involved with feelings.
There's a lot.
Yeah,
that is true.
They're just a lot. Thank you for validating me. That's it. This is the whole interview. It's just you being like, yeah, you can have emotions and they suck, and that's all I want to know.
They do suck. Yeah, and they're hard. And I think that people often think that like therapists don't we just are able to just magically process our emotions. And like, I live with it. My husband and I are both psychologists. We are not perfect at arguing, and we are not perfect at emotions. We get confused, and we get sad, and we have a hard time, and we get overwhelmed, and that happens. And I hate emotions sometimes too.
I think I always thought I was over emotional because I pushed my emotions away so much. Like that was something. I was told while I was growing up all the time that I was over emotional. And so I was like, I got to push these emotions away and out of the way. Yep. And then my therapist was like, you're pushing away emotions too much. You don't feel them. And I was like, wait, that's what I'm supposed to be doing? Because I thought I was doing it like this was the right thing to do. So I've been really hard focusing on getting them out of the way. And they're like, no, because now you're not experiencing them.
Yes.
And it's stopping you from like growing as a person. I'm like, what? That's the opposite of what I was told the whole time.
Well, because what you were told, right? And I'm not going to, because like I got this message as well. I am told that I am dramatic and over emotional.
Yes.
Less now. It was mostly as a child I was told this dramatic.
Sure.
But and I think that's mostly because people just don't say that to my face anymore. It's changed.
As an adult, people are less likely to be like, you're so dramatic. Because I don't know. I think it was like also like a compliment maybe to say to a little girl, like, oh, she's so dramatic. Like it's so charming. She's so dramatic.
But it's often dismissive, right?
Yeah,
like
it's very
you're dramatic or you're crying. And so you're just emotional. I can't talk with you right now. I can't reason with you now. Now. You're being unreasonable.
Right.
And I think it's also important to acknowledge that like where we got those messages from, and they may have come directly from parents or loved ones, but they probably didn't originate with those parents or loved ones. Those parents or loved ones were probably passing on this message that society as a whole really wants us to have. Because when we have emotions, other people have to acknowledge or experience emotions happening. And that doesn't really fit in with our like hyper-productive capitalist society.
Yeah. Well, that's why you have to get them out of the way. That's why you have to move them because how are you supposed to make money if you're worried about stuff? if you're thinking, I mean,
if you have thoughts and feelings,
right?
And there's actually some good research to support that suppressing your feelings doesn't actually help with your productivity. But that's a little bit too nuanced.
But there's a lot of things I feel like that where we learn that like repressing stuff. I think we're taught a lot that you're tougher, right? And this ties into toxic masculinity. This ties into a lot of toxic roles that we have. That you're supposed to repress stuff. Like you're supposed to push stuff away from you, and that's what makes you strong. Emotions you push away your thoughts. You are you don't give in. Like all
you just
of those...
pretend that you're a really rational human being. But the reality is like if we think about also those things that are tied into toxic masculinity and other issues, like anger is fine. Anger is an emotion that makes people remarkably irrational.
Yes. Yes, but it's okay because you needed some. If you're like, let's say somebody, okay, maybe when somebody like cuts you off on the road, anger is not the emotion that you need at that time. But if somebody is like hurt you, let's say, I don't know, your significant other has like, kissed another person. That's a very rational time to be very angry and to express that anger. And
Absolutely.
yeah, and
I think we often forget that like emotions we're not the only animals that experience emotions.
ooh,
Emotions are actually super important to our survival because they let us know that something is different, right? If I am feeling angry or sad or lonely, that is a cue that like, oh, I should change something. If I'm feeling happy or content, that's a cue that like things are going well. You should keep doing whatever is happening. Right. And so the thing with emotions is they're not super specific. They're like a car alarm that goes off just when someone gets kind of nearish. Right. Emotions are that like emotions are your check engine light. They say like they flash on and you have no idea what's wrong with your car, but you're like, oh, I guess I should do something about this.
Well, you could just ignore it, and then one day the car stops working, and you're like,
You
"How
could
did this
ignore it, and then your car
happen?"
catches on fire in the middle of the
Right.
interstate. Like that's you
Right.
could do that.
Yeah, you could do that.
But emotions are your check engine light. Like sometimes there's nothing wrong. Sometimes you just need routine maintenance, and it's not a perfect analogy because sometimes emotions mean just keep doing what you're doing. But they are really important. We see emotions show up in a lot of other mammals as well because if especially pack animals that rely on each other for survival, if you do something that pisses people off, you need to make amends or you're going to get kicked out and then you're going to die on your own. Emotions
Sorry, that's not
are what
funny. I don't know why that made me
but
laugh. Yeah, no, it's true. It's true. No, we're there as because people I've also heard the argument that like, oh, we're such herd animals and we just why is everybody, you're trying to follow and yeah, that's all, but we need to do that. We need, people will talk about, for example, a big topic is comparing yourself. You should not compare yourself to others, stay in your lane and everything. But you need to compare yourself because how do I know if I'm doing well if I don't? I mean, there's upward comparison, there's downward comparison, there's healthy comparison, there's negative comparison, all kinds.
Just like anything else, right?
Just like anything else.
You can get stuck in your emotions. You can get stuck in comparison. But I think comparison is especially helpful
inherently.
It's especially helpful right now when we're going through a global pandemic because like I don't feel okay all the time.
Right.
But also I can look around and be like, oh,
nobody
else is like okay either.
Right.
So like, am I doing okay enough where like, are my basic needs met? Am I still doing like, am I meeting kind of what I feel like is good enough at my job and in my relationships? Like what's going on?
Yeah.
Those checking in with other people, those things are really important.
Yep. No, it's true. It's true. I know that that's like totally a tangent off of Thanksgiving and boundaries and everything. But let's go back. Let's go back to that. How do we okay, because this didn't go over well for me. When I went to my family and I was like, you guys have done some things to hurt me in the past and I think we should talk about them. I got met with, well, you're just really dramatic and you just you just have all these problems, so it's not our fault. And I don't really talk to my family anymore because of that. So I'm wondering, is there a better approach, or should you just take the approach of, you know what, I'm just not going to tell them and just deal with it? Like, how do you know when it's time to talk to your family about, hey, let's all get on the same page of what is cool and what isn't cool? And how do you know when it may be, better to let's just leave it and it'll be better for me? Yeah.
That is a great question. It is also a immensely complex one.
Oh,
so we're definitely not gonna touch on all of it. I just want to acknowledge that like some of what we're going to talk about is going to apply to you and some of it is not, right? Because we want to think about, when you're thinking about like, do I want to confront or have a conversation with my family or other people who have like hurt my feelings? The first thing you really want to think about is, what are my goals? Like, what am I hoping is going to happen? And what is in the realm of realistic for what is going to happen? Right?
Yes. Okay.
So what am I hoping for? Am I hoping to be able to move forward and sit at a table and have my like have nobody comment on what I'm eating or comment on my weight, or like,
Right.
am I hoping for that? Or am I hoping for an admission of previous guilt?
Sure.
Right? Because those are actually two separate issues.
Definitely.
Because we can move forward and ask for new behavior without asking for kind of a change or a like
Right,
shift.
right. Without saying, "Hey, change who you are." Yeah, can you please change this activity? It's very different than saying, "You've hurt me for 10 years, now apologize for all of it." Those
Yes,
are two different things.
they're
Yeah.
two different things.
Yep.
And when we're thinking about what is realistic to expect, if you know, go to therapy, or you've done a lot of kind of self thinking, and you've been like, okay, I think that like part of the reason I have a struggle with my family is because of these events that have happened in the past, right? You've done all that work, and that's awesome. Chances are your family hasn't done that work.
Right.
And if we want to assume best possible intent, which means that your family intended to be loving and caring and nurturing, and they just didn't, right? If they were literally trying their best, maybe their best wasn't good enough. I totally believe that. But if we assume that they're trying their best and their best wasn't good enough, I don't know why we would expect their best to be better now.
Ooh, it's true. Okay, go on.
Right? So if you felt like as a kid, you really didn't get the acknowledgement or the care, or you felt like you were ignored or not listened to, coming back 10 years later and saying, hey, you didn't listen to me, I want you to listen to me now, is not necessarily likely to be super successful. Because if they weren't able to listen to you when you were a kid, they may not be able to listen to you when you're an adult. And that might be heartbreaking. And that might feel awful and horrible, and that might make you want to schedule an extra therapy session to talk through that stuff.
Right.
Speaking broadly. But like, and that might not be something that you're okay with. It might be something that you're grieving for a while, because maybe you held on this hope that like, just because they cared and because you cared, it would just magically get better.
Right.
And sometimes that's the case, but oftentimes we want to really acknowledge that like, if we were hurt for reasons that were due to a lack of ability or a lack of understanding, it's possible those can't just get fixed because you go to therapy. Right. And sending family members to therapy doesn't mean that they're going to get what they need.
Yeah. Right.
Because you can if you come to therapy with me, but you don't understand why you're here, we're probably not going to get to that stuff.
Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Do you find that, oh my God, my poor train of thought. I'm like so enamored in this. I've had this like weird realization that I don't need anybody to necessarily apologize to me as much as I just need to move on. I don't necessarily need to sit and wait for somebody to say they're sorry. I can forgive them without them saying they're sorry. That's where I was going with that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think like being able to being in that place is great. And it might take you a while to be in that place. You might never be in that place. And that's okay too. But having that understanding is really helpful, because then you can kind of focus on that other piece. And focusing on the other piece, which is asking for new behaviors, doesn't mean that first part is totally off the table and can never be revisited, right? You get to make a choice. You get to decide whether or not you want to ask for forgiveness, or whether you want to bring up those past issues. And just because you choose not to bring them up today and you choose to go to Thanksgiving doesn't mean that you can't bring them up next year. It doesn't mean that you can't bring them up in 20 years. Right? You're not saying because we're reestablishing or engaging in a relationship now, I give up all of my rights to have feelings or thoughts or opinions about what happened. That's not how it works.
Right. Do you find, so there is also this kind of the saying that I've seen go around that I cannot be responsible for the version of me that like you've decided that I am. And I feel like that kind of works both ways, because you also cannot be responsible. You cannot expect other people to be responsible for the version of them you want them to be, that they are, that they can't live up to. Right.
And that can be really hard, because the version that you might want for them might actually be a better life for them. Um, and that can be really, really hard to hold. But it's important to understand that we're all walking through life and we all have very different lived experiences, even if our bodysuits and our like check boxes of what we've experienced look the same.
Hmm.
That we all experience the world a little bit differently. And the world interacts with us differently,
Mm-hmm.
based on so many different pieces.
Um, oh, sorry. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying, but you're totally right. Like that does go both ways. Like I can want something for a family member or a friend. I can really want them to see or understand or change. And that might be, I might have a really good idea and I actually know better than them, but that I can't shift that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I feel like this is a great time to open up the floor. If you have any questions, please hit !join and then add your question after that. And that will add you to a queue so that we can, in an orderly manner, respond to all of your questions. I would love, love, love to have them. It's a new quick queue system we have here. So !join and add your question, and we'd love to address them, because I feel like I am going to be continually asking about my experience and what to kind of do, but I would rather answer questions for people, because this people have asked me about this topic numerous times, especially and it's especially come up now, so we're closer to Thanksgiving and everything, but we're isolated, kind of going back to the very first question, we're isolated and we're separated from people, and the people that we are with are not necessarily the best people for us.
Mm-hmm.
So I would love to know if anybody has any questions relating to that. But yeah, so I've been tempted, and actually I received I think there is a statistic. Sorry, I just started 3 sentences there. Okay, so there is a statistic about the fact that a lot of like ex-boyfriends, girlfriends have been texting their ex-significant others and trying to rekindle these relationships because people are lonely, and so they're going back to that. And I know you kind of addressed this already, but what is a better option? Like, if I'm about to text my ex who cheated on me, who was a jerk, or I'm about to text my stepmother who was a complete jerk, and I know I'm not getting anything good at that relationship, like nothing good happened, but I'm really, really lonely, and it just seems like, isn't it time to make amends? Because I'm feeling pretty lonely and it's confusing. So I think it's time to, like, I feel like we confuse those
Yes.
two emotions. I'm lonely, therefore it's time to make amends. The two connect.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, what should I do instead?
Yeah. So like we talked about earlier, right? Like, it is normal for your brain to want to go back to the known, right? Like, I want to go back to the things that I understand. I want to go back to the things that I'm familiar with. So congratulations, your brain is working. Good job.
Ah,
If you don't want to rekindle that relationship, or it's not actually a good thing to engage in because it is pretty toxic, I would encourage you to spend some time thinking about, like, what is it that you're looking for? What is it that you got from that relationship? Because even if it was a horribly toxic relationship, you probably got something out of it. And that may be what your brain is craving. So maybe that meant that you just felt less alone, or that they said things that made you feel really nice, or they gave you gifts and that made you feel loved, even when they were cheating on you, right? Like,
right.
There's probably something that you either got out of that relationship or you were hoping to get out of that relationship.
Right.
And your brain is trying to kind of reconnect with that piece, right? So, what I would do is write a list of what you think you need, what you think you're hoping for. And then I would also write a list of other ways that you might be able to get that. Now, those other ways may not feel perfect. They probably won't. If they were perfect and your brain had thought of them, then you would be doing those other things instead.
Right. Right.
But sometimes we don't have to be perfect. We can just work for good enough, right? If I'm feeling really lonely and disconnected and I just want, like you said earlier, a hug from someone other than my husband, like, I don't have that option. But I can say, like, well, what's another option? I can connect with my friend from college. I can connect with my friend from when I lived in Philly. I can, like, I'm gonna go for a run because that tends to help me flush through emotions. And none of those things are gonna feel as good as what I really, really want.
Sure.
But they may help give me a little bit more breathing space and a little bit more thinking space, and they may get some of my needs met.
I do want to say, for this problem that I have brought up, my solution is going to hug the dog. So,
Yeah.
still getting that oxytocin.
Yes.
Thank you so much for the subscriptions. By the way, the 2 subscriptions that have come in, thank you. I appreciate it. Okay. All right. So let us get into questions because we have a few. All right. Lost Forever asks, advice for abuse victims / for how to deal with my mom who's still our abuser, or just like general advice for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so that's very general. So I can absolutely give kind of general advice on that. It's going to depend on whether or not like you are making the decision to kind of cut off contact or not. And that's a decision that everybody is going to have to make on their own on a recurring basis. And it's going to be influenced by a lot of different things. For example, you might choose to continue to engage in a toxic or abusive relationship because that is where some of your finances come from, or that is how you get access to another family member that is not toxic or abusive, but is really important. Or you still really care about that person. And so even though it's toxic and uncomfortable, you don't want to totally cut off connection. So with something like that, the boundaries piece is going to be really important. And when we talk about boundaries, oftentimes we're talking about setting things that we will or will not tolerate, or we're talking about asking for specific behaviors. So that might be, if you text me at 2 a.m, I will not respond. That's setting a boundary. I'm not going to do that. Now there's a larger framework that we can talk about in terms of the communication about how to set that up in a way that makes the other person feel a little bit warm and fuzzy and more likely to go into that. But the other piece is also saying, like, asking for what you want. So that might be like, hey, I know that you really care about me and that you know that we want to be connected. I would really prefer if we scheduled a Zoom call on Saturday for 20 minutes, and that's when we talked for the week, right? If having that kind of predictability is something that's more important for you, instead of having like random phone calls throughout the week. Hey, instead of calling me, I really want to make sure I don't miss your call and that I'm in a good space to talk. So I'd like us to schedule when we talk, right?
I like that because brains like these boxes, these convenient, like, and something also that I've been working on is if it's inconvenient to experience an emotion, to take it and then say, okay, I'm gonna have 20 minutes later to experience this emotion and run through it. So it's kind of like that. It's, hey, this is going to be an unpleasant conversation, or I know it's not my favorite conversation to talk to my dad, my grandpa, my stepmom. If I put it in this neat little box, then all the emotions around it stay in that neat little box, and then I can walk away out of, like, once that time frame is done, I can basically be like, okay, ding, the time rang, like, we're good, we're done. I like that a lot.
Well, and I think especially for thinking about toxicity or abuse, right? Some of it is that unpredictability and that control, right? Like if I am engaging if I'm part of a relationship where I don't know when things are going to get bad, I don't know when things are when I'm going to be hurt, I may be at this state of kind of stress or hypervigilance all the time. But if I get to have control over when I'm engaging with this potentially toxic person, then my body and my brain are going to be able to be a little bit calmer the rest of the time, because I know that this is when this is happening. And again, whether or not this is going to be something that works for you, or for anybody, is going to really, really depend on your situation and your control and all of those pieces. But having predictability can also be really helpful, because then we're not just like waiting for the other shoe to drop at any time.
Yes, okay, so going back to our saber-toothed tiger, or whatever animal we mentioned, mountain lion, right? So going back to our mountain lion, it's, worrying that the mountain lion is behind us at any time versus being like, I know when I turn this corner, the mountain lion's there, and that's the only time it's only there. That's where the mountain lion lives. So if I want to confront him, I go over there. I like that. I like
exactly.
That. Yeah. Cage the animal. Yes. Oh my gosh. All right. So this is wonderful. Okay. All right. Next question. I'm gonna see if I can bot this up. Like, if I can use the bot correctly. Yes, I can. There we go. How do you deal with someone's negative behavior? That's another broad one.
I like the broad questions.
Okay, actually. All right, because they give us a lot to dive into. Sure.
Yeah, so I think when we're thinking about, it can be helpful to think about what are the things that we can control and what are the things that we can't control, right? So like what are the things that we're responsible for and not responsible for? Because, for example, I don't have control over my emotions. I have control over reactions to my emotions. I also
Uh-huh.
know I can have an understanding of the things that are like, I know that if like my husband eats the last of the cookies, I'm going to be really sad.
Right.
So I can say like, hey, please don't eat the last of the cookies. I really want them, right? But if he eats the cookies, I'm still gonna be sad, right? I get to then decide what to do with that. I get to decide if I want to mope around the house for 2 days, or if I want to bake new cookies, or if I want to say like, hey, that made me really sad. Can you not do that next time? I get to decide how I handle that emotion. Likewise, we don't have control over other people's emotions. Now, again, you can still do things like if I said something really mean to you, I could predict that you're probably going to be sad about it, and I shouldn't do that. That's not okay.
Right.
But at the end of the day, I can't control, no matter how much I want to, I can't control what you do and how you feel. So if we're thinking about dealing with someone's negative behavior, right? If that is name calling, if that is commenting on your weight, your sexuality, your any of those things, you can handle a couple ways, right? You can ask for a behavior change. Hey, I would really appreciate it if you not comment on whatever. Please don't do that. You can also say like, hey, and that's often a really great way to go about it, because you're giving them a replacement. You're saying like, hey, this is a clear guideline, please don't do this. You can also give a replacement behavior. Hey, instead of talking about politics, can we talk about the sky? Whatever, right? Because
Yeah.
that replacement, then you're not making their brain work very hard to come up with a replacement. You're offering it for them. We do the same thing with toddlers.
Right.
Our brains are toddlers.
Right.
Hey, I know that you're screaming on the floor right now. Would you like to get up and go get some water, or would you like to get up and go get a snack? And that helps that kiddo re-regulate and be like, oh, I wanted a snack. And again, our brains are toddlers. You're not treating your friends and family like toddlers, but like giving them something to do, because otherwise they get this sense of like, I've gotten this thing taken away from me, but I don't know how to replace it.
Right.
If we don't talk about politics, what are we going to talk about? I really just want to connect with you.
Right. But that's it. That's the key. You're looking for the connection. You're just using politics to get it. So why don't we just, yeah. There was, there was a course I took, and like in child rearing, and it was exactly that. Like if your kid is writing on the wall, you don't tell them never write again. You give them a piece of paper and you go write on this. And so your brain needs that.
You're redirecting.
Yes. Yeah. Redirecting. Your brain needs that. Like, here's your piece of paper. Can you freak out on this or be upset?
Also, if you just say don't write on the wall, then they're like, what do I do now?
Because I still need to write. My hands are itching to make something. Yeah.
In the middle of making something.
It was so good. Oh my gosh. But yeah, this is awesome. All right, we're waiting for a question to come in, if I'm not mistaken. So I'm gonna let Ella take a time to ask that question. But in general, so there it is. Okay. I got into a relationship. It's complicated, but going into it, I know that they would be very overwhelmed easily, and they shut down when they were overwhelmed. I know that, but I haven't heard from them for a fair time, and I don't know how to balance the fact that I knew that this was how it will be going in versus my own needs and boundaries. I don't know if I should call them because of my own needs, but that will probably overwhelm them even more. What are your thoughts?
It's a big question. And all of my thoughts are going to come with a caveat of like, I don't know enough about the context of your life and your situation to make any like advice, which is all the answers to all of the questions that we answered
42.
Today.
Okay. The answer is 42. We all know that, but
yes. I think thinking about what it is that's important to you in that relationship, right? Like what are kind of your needs in a relationship, because those are really valid. Maybe this relationship is a good fit for you right now, and maybe it's not. If you have certain needs, like being able to be regularly in contact with someone, it can be great to have a conversation and say, hey, right? And this is again going back to the kind of asking for behaviors and having that conversation. You can say like, hey, it's important for me when I'm in a relationship with someone, and that could be a friendship, but whatever your relationship is. It's important for me when I'm in a relationship with someone to feel like I'm able to be in contact with you on a regular basis. I'd really like if I text or call you for you to respond within 24 hours or 48 hours. Is that something that seems reasonable to you? You're saying this is what I want, but you're also opening it up to them saying, I can't offer that, or I don't want to offer that, or I think it's unreasonable. It allows for this conversation and this negotiation. You're not saying, hey, you never called me back, and that sucks. You're a horrible person.
Right.
You're just saying, this is what I need, or this is what I would like. How can we make this work?
Right. And if you get a rejection there, then kind of, I like that, because that gets you then closer to, okay, I guess I need to move on from this relationship, versus just kind of sitting in this pattern of being like, do I do it? Do I not do it? Is it, yeah, there's so many options floating through your head. Whereas if you just say, this is a need I have, can you fulfill this need? No. Okay. Sounds like we're not matching up. Let's move on with our lives. Both of us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it allows that conversation to open up, right? Because maybe we also, even if you were raised in the same town, in the same city, and you went to the same high school, you probably have some different ideas about like what certain phrases and what a relationship's supposed to look like, and how soon you're supposed to respond, and all of these pieces. And so by kind of having these explicit conversations, it allows us to get a lot of misconceptions and assumptions off the table.
All right. Yes, Ella, please go back to the VOD, because it was a very, very, very good answer. But okay, Taito, we got your question. Don't worry. We'll probably have to copy paste the ones that are over 280 characters, and also warn people. So we're trying a new queue system, if Dr. Kilmer. So it's been like very touch and go. And what's she gonna like? What's she not gonna like? The computer. So the question was, sorry, my question isn't super concrete. I'm not sure how to ask this, but one of the people I live with doesn't share the same emotional language, so to speak, with me. And talking about boundaries with them and the whys behind my needs is super hard. Send tips. So please advise.
That's a great question. Oftentimes we have really different language. We have really, really different language about needs. We might have different values. We might also have different assumptions and understandings about what needs are valid and what needs are not. And so I think it's great that you already know that you and your roommate are on kind of different wavelengths about this.
And so that's already a step ahead. Yay. Okay.
So some of that is about having those conversations. Hey, this is what I would like. Is this something that you're willing to give me? Is this something that we can talk about? Right. You can also kind of set boundaries. Like, for example, if they like blast loud music, or they knock on your door really early in the morning, you can say like, hey, if you knock on my door before 8 a.m., I'm not going to answer. I need that space, or I need that sleep. I think oftentimes in boundaries, especially if we're people pleasers, we get this sense or this feeling that we have to justify our needs. And sometimes justifying our needs can be really helpful if we want people to get those needs met, but we aren't actually required to do that, at least not to ask for our needs. So sometimes when we're asking for our needs, we can engage in some reciprocal bargaining that doesn't necessarily have to be around.
Okay.
Sorry, what?
No, I said, okay. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, you're good. So that reciprocal bargaining, for example, like, hey, if you were willing to take up the trash out for me, that would make me feel really warm and fuzzy inside, and I would feel loved and appreciated, right? I'm telling you that what you're getting out of that is good feelings from me. And if you care about me feeling good, then that might be enough of a reward. But maybe it's not. Maybe you're feeling really bummed, or we're just roommates and you don't actually care about my feelings that much, other than like enough to make sure we're okay. And so instead I might say like, hey, will you take out the trash tonight? I will take it out next week, right? So having that, giving that, like, this is what I'm asking for and this is what you get from it, can be really helpful. So having that conversation, that might be something around like, hey, this is a boundary I'd really like to set. This is a boundary that I have, or this is a need that I have. What are your needs? I want to make sure that both of our needs are being met in this situation. That allows for this conversation to be open. And it also presupposes that you are going to have different needs, and that's okay. And that kind of a conversation where you understand your roommate's needs and your roommate understands your needs might be a little bit easier than just saying, hey, I want all these things from you.
Yeah. Oh, wonderful. Wonderful. Oh my gosh. Fam, I'll give you a few more minutes to enter any other questions you might have. We could probably answer just one more. This is absolutely lovely. Okay, so I'm gonna go back and ask more questions because I can. So what about parasocial relationships? How do you, I guess, you know what? No, I'm going to back away from parasocial relationships and bring it back to what we're talking about right now. How do you set boundaries with yourself about, like I said, like, I feel like I'm on Twitter too much. I feel like I'm on Discord too much. I know this is the only way that I'm talking to people. But I have such a hard time because, you know, my friends are across the globe, and when they can talk to me, maybe that's the only 10 minutes that they'll have that day to talk to me. But I'm really busy, and I'm going to neglect my needs because I want to just talk to them for 10 friggin' minutes. So I'm going to stop everything I'm doing. And how do I maybe do a little bit better about regulating that, and how much time I'm spending, and how I'm prioritizing my needs, and things like that?
Absolutely. That's really hard. I will be super honest. I struggle with that stuff as well. When we're thinking about kind of those strategies, first recognize where we're at, right? Like this is different. And so what productivity looks like and what connection looks like might be different, and that's okay. And you can still say, yeah, but what I'm doing right now isn't working for me, right? That's something that I actually did this week. I was like, I feel like I'm trying so hard. I'm trying so hard at all the things, and I'm not quite I'm not meeting my bar anywhere. And my husband very helpfully pointed out to me that I am trying really hard, but in no kind of focused way. Like my brain's like, oh, try in this area, and then try in this area, and then try in this area.
Right.
And that was the uncomfortable and helpful reminder that, like, it is normal for our brains to go a little bit into panic mode. Like, I'm not getting the thing that I need. So, like, maybe I just need to be on Twitter all the time, because then I can get those 10 minutes that I'm hoping for. But if I turn off Twitter, or if I put it away, or I put my phone across the room, then, like, I might miss those 10 minutes, and that would be really, really hard. So acknowledge that, like, your brain's trying to be helpful. It's just not sometimes.
Right.
This is another one where going back to, what are the needs that are the most important to you right now? What are your kind of baseline things? What are your values? What are your most important needs? And then what is the bare minimum you can accomplish to meet those needs? And that includes work, family, creativity, school, pet care, childcare. You get to decide what your minimum is, right? I'm assuming that everyone's minimum is like above CPS standards for like childcare, and like above failing for most people for school, but also maybe that's not a possibility this semester. And so your goal instead is to set yourself up for success for next semester. So you're going to set what those minimums are. And then you're going to have an idea. You're going to say, like, okay, well, how can I help enforce my own minimums? Because your brain is going to try and get you to not do that, because a lot of your minimums are about what's going to help you today, but also what's going to help you tomorrow, next week. Your brain only cares about the next 5 minutes to 8 hours.
Right.
So, and also Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, those are all literally designed to capture and sink your attention.
For hours.
That is their sole purpose. Yeah, they're supposed to connect people and stuff. But their design is very intentional to keep you on that app at all times. So setting alarms, right? Setting parental controls on your phone so that you get kind of locked out of things. Use your brain to outsmart your brain. If you have a hard time scrolling on Twitter or scrolling on TikTok, TikTok was hard for me. And so I started setting alarms, because I would just get into this like scroll wheel, and it would be fun. I would learn cool things, and Hank Green is great, and I've learned a lot about science.
Right.
But I also would realize I'd get off an hour later and I would be exhausted, and I wouldn't have done any of the self-care tasks that I needed. And I didn't actually get that kind of hit of endorphins that I was hoping I would get. So part of that, deciding what your minimum needs are and setting things like timers, is also being realistic with yourself about, like, hey, is this thing that I'm calling self-care giving me enough return for my investment?
Right. Yeah.
Are there other ways that I could meet this need that are more efficient?
Right.
Like, I hate doing dishes, but sometimes doing dishes actually makes me feel more accomplished and calm than spending 30 minutes on TikTok.
Right.
Even
Right.
if doing dishes isn't fun.
Yeah. For so and to tie that back, it probably would be more productive if I messaged that friend that I wanted to talk to and be like, "Hey, when do you have 10 minutes to talk?" Because then, oh wait, I tied it all back together. Because
You
then we
tied it all back
schedule.
together.
Because then you schedule. Yes. Okay. Excellent.
Yeah, and
you
then your brain
schedule the
has a
time.
cool thing
Yeah.
to look forward to,
Yes.
right? Your brain's
Right.
like, I get to talk to my friend on Saturday.
Yeah.
I want to get all this work done now so I can talk to my friend on Saturday.
Yep.
I'm really, wait, our brains thrive on anticipation, right? Our
Yeah.
brains, getting excited and being anticipated about things sometimes gives us more of a rush of endorphins than like actually getting the thing itself.
Right. Right.
And so having those kind of short-term or long-term goals or rewards, and a reward can be talking to a friend, can be really, really helpful of giving you something to look forward to during the week.
Yeah. All right, we have one last question and then we're done. We're done with the queue, I mean. Okay, hold on. It won't let me scroll on that screen. Okay, how do you bring up the topic of boundaries and explain what they are? Yeah, because that's actually, because somebody's asked me, they're like, what are boundaries? And I'm like, the people
Stuff.
don't do past this thing. That's what I got. That's all I got for you.
Boundaries is that's a really good question, because oftentimes when we talk about boundaries, right, we're talking about like, hey, don't go past this line. Hey, don't call me at 2 a.m, or hey, don't yell at me. Sometimes it's also kind of asking for our needs can get kind of wrapped up in boundaries because they're very, very related. Sometimes, depending on what you're talking about, that can be another way of setting a boundary. If I'm trying to set a boundary with someone, I tend not to use the word boundary.
It's better to just tell them what you want instead of being like, this is a boundary.
Because people sometimes will be like, well, why do you need to set up boundaries with me?
Right.
We have a lot of misconceptions about what boundaries are. Boundaries are like very vital to the healthiest, most open and trusting relationships. Boundaries are like the understanding that our partner will respect our boundaries is part of why we can have trusting relationships, right? Like, if I feel safe enough in my relationship to not have a lock on my phone, it's also because like there's nothing on my phone, but it's also because I trust that my partner is not going to like go through all of my messages and my emails every night, right? I trust that that's not going to happen. Now, that might not be a boundary we've ever talked about, but I trust that it's there and it's going to be respected. When I'm setting up boundaries with people, I, like you mentioned, just go in and kind of ask for what you want, or say like, this is how I'm going to behave. When we're setting a boundary, I think oftentimes people when we're thinking about a boundary, you can't actually control whether or not someone crosses a boundary, but you can control what you do. So this is why when I talk about setting boundaries, I'll say like, hey, don't knock on my door before 8 a.m. If you knock on my door before 8 a.m., I'm not going to answer. Because I'm saying like, what's going to happen if you cross that boundary? Hey, if you start talking about politics at Thanksgiving, I'm going to leave the Zoom call. That's setting these clear expectations. It means we're all on the same page. Because if you just say, hey, please don't talk about politics at Thanksgiving. Now, if they say yes, right, you might not need to add that, like, what's going to happen, depending on whether or not you trust them. If you don't trust them, I would start out with, hey, if we talk about boundaries at Thanksgiving, that's going to make me feel really uncomfortable. And to protect my own mental health, I'm going to leave the Zoom call. Is kind of setting up this piece of like, what is going to happen. It means that everybody understands what the rules are. And if the rules aren't followed, then this other thing happens. It's also okay to have conversations about boundaries, right? Because if I say like, hey, if we end up talking about politics at Thanksgiving, I'm going to feel uncomfortable and I'm going to choose to leave the Zoom call. The person I'm talking to might say, oh man, honestly, I'm really expecting someone to bring up politics. How about if it comes up, I ask if we don't talk about it. And then if everybody agrees and we stop, are you comfortable staying? Right. So there's still that kind of negotiation there. Again, you have to choose whether or not this is a safe person to negotiate with.
Right.
But having that conversation could be helpful. I hope that kind of explains what boundaries are.
I think so. I mean, I feel better about, I think I think this is the case with a lot of mental health terms, right? Like you say mental health and people are like, oh, you say, let's just talk about what's going on or have real talk. And people are like, yeah, real talk. Yeah, I got that.
Yeah,
But it's the
real
same
talk.
thing. It's the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ah, yeah. Thank you so much for being here. Please tell everybody how they can find you. I'm gonna obviously your links are gonna be posted all over the place, but tell everybody how they can find you.
Yeah, absolutely. I am begrudgingly on Twitter. It doesn't work with my brain very well. But the best place I will respond to messages, but the best place to find me on Twitter is actually at Drs Kilmer. The doctors is spelled all the way out. There is an S. Because like I mentioned, we are a 2-psychologist household. Neither of us do Twitter well, so we have the same professional account to be able to manage that. Again, I'm the Director of Education and Training at Game to Grow. I did mention that we have those kind of 3 training tracks. If you are an educator of any kind, we have a training coming up December 12th as an introductory training. If you're a mental health professional, we have a training coming up January 16th. If you're a community member who's interested in learning more, we don't have our next training scheduled. We just had one like last weekend. But there is a wait list under that kind of training piece. So those are the best ways to find me.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. This was absolutely brilliant. You let me pick your brain to the max, which I appreciate endlessly. We're going to be right back, everybody. Thank you. Thank you again, Dr. Kilmer.
Thanks, everybody.